Welcome back after an incredible weekend of college football that did not disappoint.
That's right.
Darren, while my mind is on the games, can I share a beautiful moment I saw on TV the other day? Simone
Absolutely.
Augustus, one of the greatest basketball players to come through the LSU women's program, was inducted into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. As part of her induction speech, she recited part of the song Callin' Baton Rouge, changed a few
Nice.
words, but it was a beautiful moment to see her pay tribute and honor to Baton Rouge. And I got to admit, Darren, the lyrics are fresh on my mind after Saturday.
I would think so.
How many times in your life can you say, my team did not lead for a single second the entire game, but they won?
that's so Vanderbilt. I got to be honest. That sounds like something. Well done.
Before we get into our three takeaways from this weekend, let me give a shout out to the LSU offensive line.
Oh
Ole
yeah.
Miss entered this game leading the country in sacks. The Tigers O-line gave up 0 sacks. So great job to the guys up front in the trenches. Incredible, incredible performance from them to protect Nussmeier. Great weekend for LSU football. Yet there was a whole lot more that
Yeah.
happened, Darren. Saturday did not disappoint.
No, not at all. Not at all. And before we get any further in takeaways, I like that whole shouting out our team that we're fans of. Vanderbilt's 4-2. Just thought I'd beat Kentucky. Just thought I'd throw it in there. Just in case you hadn't heard. Just wanted to throw it in there. Oh, and our quarterback is named Diego Papia. Go ahead. I didn't.
Also, evidently, Darren, Vanderbilt's doing a lot more in NIL than Kentucky is.
Oh, we'll talk about that. Don't worry. That
Let's
will
jump
come
in.
up.
Let's jump into your first takeaway, Darren. What is it?
As you watch what's going on at Oklahoma, and you see the struggles that they're having offensively, uh, you one of the first things to do, or a lot of people do, is look at the quarterback. Oh, is the quarterback an issue? And you can say honestly, that's kind of one of the first things that the Oklahoma coaching staff did, was look at the quarterback. And so what I want to do is in my first takeaway, I don't want to necessarily want to make a point as much as I want you and I to discuss it, because I think it's a very, very difficult question that needs a couple of different angles. We're halfway through the season. Who's the starter going forward? What are your thoughts on it?
Uh, you're right, Darren. Looking at the statistics, there's not a clear answer here.
Exactly.
You can look at Jackson Arnold against Temple, against Houston.
Mm-hmm.
Average statistics, they won both those games. Temple was probably his best game, 4 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Tulane got my attention because Tulane always fields a competitive team. They have 2 losses this year, 7
Yep.
points at Kansas State, and then the loss against OU in Norman. So they're not a shabby team at
Right.
all. Against Tulane, 18 for 29 for 169 yards, a TD, an interception, 14 rushes for 97 yards, 2 touchdowns. Those sound like Michael Hawkins rush. He's really good at rushing. Tennessee game seemed to really do Arnold in. There were some concerns about how he was doing so far this year. Of course, a new offensive coordinator at Oklahoma. Questions about the system, a lot of injuries, We don't want to minimize that. And then the Tennessee game, he came out 7 for 16, 54 yards and interception, and they were losing 19-3 at halftime. Insert Michael Hawkins Jr. Well, he finished that Tennessee game 11 for 18, 132 yards, 1 touchdown. Almost rushed for another one, but it was called short. Against Auburn, he was 10 for 15 for 161 yards. Pretty good. No touchdowns thrown, but he did rush for a touchdown. And then against Texas, 19 for 30, 148 yards. He rushed 20 times for 27 yards. So
Yeah.
Granted, that's against the number one rated defense in the
in the
SEC.
country. Yeah.
But you're right, Darren. There is no clear. You can't look at either one of these guys and say
Hmm. Hmm.
statistically, this is who needs to be playing.
Yeah, and that's my thing. And even when you kind of pull back and I think what you did is very important because you have to consider the competition. You can't say, well, so and so, quarterback A had a great game and threw for 350 yards and two touchdowns, and so well this guy has two, and one of them was against just to pull out teams. One of them was against Tennessee, and one of them was against ULM. Those aren't the same numbers, even if they're the same numbers. So I think that's a very important thing. But I think even if you get out of the individual games and pull back a little bit more 1,000 foot, the statistics don't tell you anymore. If anything, it makes it a little bit muddier. Michael Hawkins Jr. has less touchdowns, less interceptions, but he also had less throws. His efficiency is almost identical. I mean, they're within 3 percentage points of having the same completion percentage, not efficiency, completion of percentage. Their yards per attempt, he's got about a yard more on average per attempt, which is really kind of the only thing that he stands out in. So I'm kind of wondering, so does that mean that you look at and say, okay, obviously it's not just about this year because we don't like the way anything's going this year, but who can keep us in games this year? So maybe we have a shot to end or a shot to win at the end of the game, but also is a build toward the future. I almost feel like that's kind of the approach that they're going to have to take. But again, I don't know if there's a clear clear answer for that. My gut, honestly, just because I don't want to bring up a question and not have an answer, my gut, for whatever reason, is Michael Hawkins Jr. I like his athleticism. I like the fact if he were to be given enough time to truly get comfortable in the system, I think he would that comfort would create confidence. Preparation breeds confidence. Would create a confidence to where he's looking at his progression. Who's who's one, who's two. Neither are open. Now I'm going to drop my eyes down, see if I can find a gap, and he can exploit that gap. He's shown that athleticism and that speed. So I think that might be the better option. It probably is who I would go with, but still, I think it's an increasingly difficult choice. But I will say this, I think they have to make a choice because, with rare exception, I think one of the most true statements in all of football is if you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterback. And so I think that's a very, very true statement. And I think, especially in the world of NIL and transfer portal, you can't swap guys out for series like you used to be able to. And it's just not something that's going to work within a team, the team structure as it exists today. So I think they have to make a call. And my gut tells me Mike Hawkins Jr. I could be wrong, but that's where my eyes go and kind of what my gut feels. Do you think there's a choice that they should go forward with?
It typically doesn't work. It worked for Florida with Chris Leak and Tim Tebow. I think they ended up winning the national championship.
Very true.
That was the year.
I'm pretty sure you're right. I think you're right.
So, but you're right. Typically, it does not work. Oklahoma opted for the future.
Hmm.
I would have personally liked Arnold to get another shot after the Tennessee game.
Yeah.
You just played one of the best defenses in the entire country.
Very
Okay,
true.
you had a really bad game. I
Hmm.
thought OU would give him another shot. Okay, you're the incumbent. We're still developing Hawkins Jr. We want to bring him along. Instead, they just threw Hawkins Jr. to the wolves.
Yeah.
Now
Very true.
he played he played well enough to win at Auburn. I think the defense really carried that game.
Very much so.
Texas, I don't, and I picked OU. That series has a history of upsets, but the way that Texas played Saturday,
Yeah.
I'm not sure it would have mattered who was playing quarterback for OU.
Valid
So
point.
it's frustrating. What's going to be frustrating for OU fans is you can talk about the offensive line, the new offensive coordinator, the system that's being run. Now you got a freshman quarterback who's learning the ropes. He's incredibly talented. There's a tremendous upside there, but the kid's going to take his lumps
Yeah,
this year. Uh,
very true.
Unfortunately, you I don't think OU wanted to see this happen their first year in the SEC. Now,
Absolutely.
the future's bright, but it could be rough going for now. Not as rough maybe as what Mississippi State is going through. I
Whew,
think they got
goodness.
a very talented freshman quarterback in Michael Van Buren.
Yeah,
Problem with Mississippi State is the defense is giving up an enormous amount of
yeah,
points and yardage to other teams. So,
yeah.
yeah, I agree with you, Darren. I think it's a valid point.
But I also think you brought up a great point. When you look at their O line and when you look at their wide receiver room, whew, I mean, those are the amount of injuries that they have in those two areas. That's going to make it hard on any quarterback. That's also part of today's game, especially in the SEC.
Yeah, everybody's got injuries this
Yeah,
time of year.
yeah,
So you don't want to use that as an excuse. And
absolutely.
this goes back to your recruiting. You're
Hmm.
recruiting depth a lot of times.
Yeah,
So when those unfortunate injuries happen, you've got the next man up to fill that slot. At some point, you can't just keep saying, "Oh, look at all the injuries! Look at all the injuries."
yeah,
This is college football. These guys are playing on scholarship, or some of them are making money
yeah,
off of NIL. So you expect to have guys, your second string guys, who can step in the event of injuries.
absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great point. What's your first takeaway?
I want to focus a little bit on the freshman quarterbacks in the SEC. I mentioned I've been very impressed with the play of Michael Van Buren from Mississippi State. The kid has started 2 games, and his 2 starts have been Texas and Georgia. How's that for welcome to Division I SEC college football? Jeff Levy is in his first year. He's trying to build the program to fit what he wants it to be. I think he's got his quarterback. Mississippi State fans, it's I know it's no consolation. We've talked about this before, but Van Buren is legit. This kid, I think, is going to be a star in the SEC. He didn't show a lot against Texas, 12 of 23 for 144 yards, but against Georgia, your Mississippi State Bulldogs put up 31 points. I don't care when it happened, how it happened, who was on the field. You put up 31 points against a Georgia defense. Van Buren was 20 of 37, 306 yards, 3 touchdowns, and only 1 interception. Now, is part of that the Jeff Levy effect? When you look at what he did with OU in 2023, now granted, he had Dylan Gabriel, who is pretty good quarterback. We saw that when Oregon knocked off Ohio State Saturday night. Oklahoma, under Levy's last year in 2023, averaged 507 yards total offense a game, 41 points a game. This year, OU is averaging 287 yards a game, 24 points a game. They have a freshman quarterback in there. So does Mississippi State. And while Van Buren and Hawkins Jr. statistics are somewhat similar, Mississippi State's putting up more points than Oklahoma is. So
Hmm.
that raises some questions. But when you look at what's happened in the SEC this year, here are freshman quarterbacks that have played, that have started games. Of course, Michael Hawkins Jr. from Oklahoma, Lenoris Sellers from South Carolina. Some of these are redshirt freshmen that we'll mention. Nico from Tennessee. We've talked about him. Uh, Van Buren, of course, from Mississippi State. Marcel Reed, remember him from A&M when Wegman was out with the injury. DJ Lagway from Florida, who now is the starter with Graham Mertz's season-ending injury. We hated to see that. It's Lagway's team now. Hank Brown from Auburn started 1 game, started another one actually, I think, and it didn't
Yeah,
really go well
didn't
for him.
go
So
well. Yeah.
reinserted as the incumbent. So you look at those freshmen or those redshirt freshman quarterbacks on that list. Now look at the passing leaders in the SEC. And here's the point I'm trying to make. It is almost impossible for a freshman quarterback to have a lot of success in the SEC. Here are the passing leaders. Jackson Dart, he's a senior. Garrett Nussmeier, junior. Carson Beck, senior. Talon Green, junior. Jalen Milroe, Jr., Brady Cook, Sr., Peyton Thorne, Sr., Nico Imalieva, I'm sorry, freshman, Diego Pavia, there's your guy, Sr., Blake Shapen, who is injured for the season,
Yeah.
Sr. Out of the top 10 passing leaders in the SEC, they're all upperclassmen, juniors and seniors, except for Nico at Tennessee. He is the only freshman, he's a redshirt freshman, to break that list. So the notion that we're going to bring in 18-year-old kids and we're going to put them out against SEC defenses and we expect them to have a lot of success, it's just not panning out. The numbers aren't adding up there. It's tremendously hard to play quarterback in the SEC, let alone for a freshman to go out and try to do it.
I think those are some great points. And I think, you even brought that to an extent. You didn't specifically focus on freshman quarterbacks, but I think you even brought that up, brought that to the forefront a little bit last week. We were talking about Nico and seeing his struggles, how he looked in the non-conference schedule versus now that we've gotten into the conference schedule, the difference in those passing percentages, the difference in the yards downfield, all of those different things. And I think that's a very great point. And accentuates that point.
What's your second takeaway?
Well, since we've talked about Oklahoma a little bit, and I know you talked about more than just Oklahoma, but you brought up the Oklahoma quarterback, I'm going to switch just a little bit to our Texas friends and ask a question. When you look at Texas's roster and the people that are stat makers so far this year, you've got Quinn Ewers, you've got Arch Manning, Isaiah Bond, Ryan Wingo, Quintrevian Wisner, excuse me, Jarek Gibson. I mean, those are some pretty impressive names that have put up some nice stats so far this year, 6 weeks into the season, or 7 weeks into the season. And it kind of looks like an embarrassment of riches. But as you look at what the remainder of their schedule looks like, I think the question is it an embarrassment of SEC riches? Is it going to look the same, just like you talked about with freshman quarterbacks, as they get into the heart of this schedule? Yes, they are number one. They are leading the conference and the country, up there toward the top in the country in offense and defense. So you really can't say that they haven't played well because they have. I think the question is, as we go into the heart of this schedule, when they face Georgia, Vanderbilt, I'm just saying they got to go to Nashville. Ask Alabama how that works. I'm just saying, Florida, but that's at home. Arkansas in Fayetteville, Kentucky, who has proven, even if they're not, at the top of the conference necessarily, they can be a game wrecker. I don't think you can take that title away from them. And then they have to end with A&M, who's on a 5-game run right now. What are they going to look like at the end of the season? The big thing that stood out to me when kind of looking into their schedule is the defenses that they've faced so far have an average national rank of 76, and the offenses they face so far have an average national rank of 100. This back half of the schedule, where you also have to deal with things like injuries, and even if you've got freshmen that are performing well, hitting that wall, some of those concerns that you have to deal with, how players are hanging on even with nagging injuries. On this back half, the average defense they will face is in the top 40 in the country, and the average offense they will face is in the top 60. So you are talking about a very dramatic improvement of who they are going to be lining up against week in and week out. And that's not a slight to Oklahoma or Mississippi State. Don't intend it to be. But, there was such a big deal made out of even the Michigan game. Michigan is the 44th defense in the country right now and the 110th or 119th offense. So they should have run all over Michigan when you look at it from an offensive and defensive rank number. So now you're going to be facing Georgia, who is the number 28 offense in the country. You're going to be facing Vanderbilt, who is the number 54 defense. Arkansas, who is the number 8 offense. I mean, there is a significant increase. Kentucky is the number 4 defense in the country right now today. Even with the struggles they've had, their defense is going to bring the thunder when you play them. You cannot dispute that. They do have some discipline issues, some penalty issues, different things, but their defense is going to bring the thunder, and that's who you're going to be facing on the back half of this schedule. So the question that I think you really have to look at, or what you have to focus in with Texas, is now we're getting into the meat of it. Now you're going to be facing somebody different than UTSA, ULM, and number 119 in the country offense, Michigan. I guess really my whole point is I've heard a lot of people talk about Texas running the table. Don't know that I buy that. When you look at who they're facing on the back half of this, including starting this week with Georgia, I don't know that I buy the foregone conclusion of obviously they're going to run the table. I don't think that's this obvious thing. I think if they do run the table, they're going to have to earn it, and earn it in some tight games where they show they know how to finish, that talent shows up when you need it to, just like you were talking about with the game this weekend with LSU. Even when the game hasn't gone your way, you figure out a way to grab it in the end because you stayed close and you finish the game. Texas is going to have to show they have that in order to stay at the status they are right now in the season.
Well said. I agree. I'd be surprised if Texas runs the table.
I think it's a much more difficult proposal than I think some people are giving it credit for.
Yeah, definitely.
What's your second takeaway?
My second takeaway is adapting to new offensive mentalities. This is a struggle for a lot of us fans of our teams. As much as I enjoyed watching LSU win in overtime against Ole Miss, I quickly, in looking at the statistics, began to bemoan the lack of a ground game. We've got to be able to run the ball. A lot of us say that, particularly in the South. We're all about run the ball. In fact, there's a country song that was released recently. I think it's Jeanette Paulette, is it? Or Jenna Paulette.
Right.
Jenna Paulette, about running the ball. And there's a line in there, something to the effect of pass the gravy or pass the green beans and run the ball. we say that all the time. Sometimes, though, we have to learn to adapt as our coaches take the teams and adapt to what the strengths of the teams are. Nowhere is this more prevalent, I think, or obvious than what's happening at Tennessee right now. We both believe Josh Heupel is an outstanding coach. We also thought, like a lot of Tennessee fans, that after those first few games of the season, that Tennessee was going to be lighting people up on the scoreboard. We were surprised when they lost to Arkansas and only put up 14 points. Of course, credit goes to Arkansas. I think what Josh Heupel is doing now is incredibly smart coaching. He's not panicking. He's playing to their strengths. One of our listeners actually made a comment on last week's standalone episode about Nico. And I don't have the listener's name. The initials are GRG FKN 3076. And I think he hit on something. This really got me digging into it this week. He brought up Dylan Sampson. He says Sampson makes something out of nothing a lot, but if he had better blocking, he's going to be busting runs left and right. The guy is incredible. So I began looking at some statistics. Of course, here we are. Same thing with Oklahoma. We're talking about the offensive line. If the offensive line was better, these poor guys, they get so much blame and very little credit. It's hard to play in the trenches. Everybody can improve. I'm not disregarding that. So here's what I think Heupel is doing. He's creating a new offensive mentality for Tennessee this year. And the mentality is simply this: run the ball and play solid defense. Their defense is ranked second in the SEC. They're only giving up 249 yards a game. So if you're going to run the ball, you better have a running back that can perform up to standards. And Dylan Sampson is. The junior has carried for 118 carries for 699 yards, 15 touchdowns. He's averaging 5.9 yards per carry in games so far. The game against Florida, he was a lifesaver. 112 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns. Against Arkansas, he ran for 138 yards, 2 touchdowns. Against Oklahoma, 92 yards, 1 touchdown. Against Kent State, 101 yards, 4 touchdowns. North Carolina State, 132 yards, 2 touchdowns. You have a defense that's second only to Texas in the SEC. You've got an incredible running back in Sampson. This is what Heupel is doing. It's no knock on Nico. And Nico Heupel is bringing Nico along, I think, in a very positive way, instead of just throwing him out there and saying, I want you to pass 50 times in this game, and I want you to win the game for us. He's like, what are we good at right now? We can run the ball, and we can play incredible defense, and that's our formula right now as Nico continues to develop. I think Heupel's doing a great job.
I think those are some great points. You put me in a weird position because I have to agree that I like the Tennessee coach. Not really a fan of that, but I think I think if you look at what they're doing honestly, and you don't, I mean, there's nothing wrong with being a passionate fan base. I mean, every school needs that, but sometimes you have to take a step back from the passion and say, okay, even if it doesn't look like last year, what's the coach doing? What's he trying to accomplish? Are we still moving in the same direction, even if it might be a different path? And I think you can honestly say that about Tennessee. I mean, just like you talked about in your first takeaway, you got a freshman quarterback, and the conference is tough, especially on freshman quarterbacks. So, what can you do to give him time to get comfortable? Well, you got a guy that, just like our listener said, or our viewer said, hey, man, you give this guy a ball, left, right, left, right. If he had a line, he'd be even better. He'd be even more dangerous. Well, then utilize that and let your freshman quarterback come on. Great takeaway. Some really, really good points.
How about your third takeaway, Darren?
All right, it's gonna sound like I'm taking a shot at two different teams, but I'm actually not. So I'm going to introduce
before, Darren.
I am not piling on because I'm going to talk about two, and one of them is going to have a positive spin. So in 2021, just 3 short years ago, our good buddy Billy Napier, we love you, Billy, but oof, tough year. Some better moments here lately, but oof, tough year. Was asked during an ESPN interview about some of the calls he's made as a head coach. This was when he was at UL Lafayette. And his response to that was, scared money don't make money. And because he was in southern Louisiana, he even ended it with a, which I thought was well done. But anyway, that's scared money don't make money. Well, this week against Tennessee, with 29 seconds left in the game, Florida scores and has a choice. He can either kick the extra point or go for 2 to win the game. Extra points for overtime, go for 2, win the game. 2021, Billy Napier, scared money, don't make money, I think we know what he would do. 2024, Billy Napier, kick the extra point and went into overtime. Ultimately, an overtime that they lost. Now I'm going to pause there for just a second and say, move over to the LSU game versus Ole Miss. 28 seconds left instead of 29 seconds. And LSU scores. You've got the choice. 2 points wins the game. 1 point goes into overtime. The same choice was made. But I think here's the difference. And here's where Florida fans should be more upset than LSU fans. Billy Napier is playing with scared money. He's running for his job. Now, we've had conversations about what the year might look like for Brian Kelly. The end of the year might look like if this year turns out to be a colossal disappointment. But obviously, they're not on that track. Obviously, Brian Kelly doesn't believe. I mean, you don't get where you are if you don't believe you can't turn it around. He obviously thinks he's not worried about what the end of the season is going to look like, that they're going to be okay. To hear him explain it, both immediately after the game and in the press conference afterwards, he said, our guys had fought from behind all night. And then we finally at least get to the place where we can tie it. That was exhausting. I wanted to give them a chance. Let's tie the game, get a complete 0-0 reset, and then take control. 99 times out of 100, I'm a fan of our old buddy Sam Pittman. Let's go for two, win this thing, and get on the bus. But hearing Brian Kelly explain it, it made sense to me. And I think it makes Billy Napier's decision make even less sense. I think Billy Napier showed that in that moment, he is playing with scared money. And in his own quote, that's not going to make him money. I think even if he went for two and didn't make it and lost that game, there is a large segment of the Florida fan base that would have said, at least you're still trying. We can get behind this. You're at least still trying to win games. And I think obviously winning, covers a multitude of sins. If they kick it going to overtime, beat Tennessee in Knoxville, probably having a different conversation. But it didn't work out that way. He didn't go for two. They ultimately ended up losing in overtime. And I think it's a decision. I think this might be the moment that you look back at the end of the season and say, okay, there is the moment that the administration made the decision that this guy is not going to, unless something incredible happens for the remainder of the season, that this guy is not going to be here beyond this year. Because I think it was a scared money decision, and it was a poor decision. And I think it makes it an even more poor decision if you contrast it against Brian Kelly and the decision he made. Unfortunately for our friend Billy, scared money don't make money. And I think he exhibited for it. He did a perfect exhibition. Man, the English language just stinks. He did a perfect exhibition of that quote in the final moments of that Tennessee game. Should have went for two.
It's hard to argue that. I think when you're in the underdog role like that,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. Brian
Yep.
Kelly's first year, they got Alabama at home. They score. Okay, what are we going to do? You got a chance here. Go ahead and win the game.
Mm-hmm.
I think Florida should have done that,
Yeah.
especially with you knew Tennessee was just going to pound them with Sampson.
Yep.
That's what they did, and that's how they won. The LSU Ole Miss game, when LSU scored, I never once thought go for two. I just that
No.
feeling wasn't there. I thought let's get to overtime. This is one of the most raucous crowds I've seen and heard at Death
Absolutely.
Valley in several years. You've got the advantage here going
Yep.
into overtime. So I think your points are spot on, Darren. Great points.
What's your third takeaway?
My third takeaway is welcome to the new SEC, where parity now reigns. No longer is this a one-team league or a two-team league or even a three-team league. This is a league where every single game is up for grabs. Vandy beats Alabama. Oklahoma goes on the road and beats Auburn. Texas, they're still picking up steam after entering the SEC. LSU tops Ole Miss. South Carolina blows out Kentucky, then almost beats Alabama, and they probably should have beat Alabama, especially after they recovered that onside kick.
Yep.
Mississippi State, in a tremendous, difficult rebuild year, puts 31, led by a freshman quarterback, up against Georgia. Tennessee finding ways to win, yet loses to Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
A&M totally destroys a top 10 Missouri team. Florida takes Tennessee to overtime. Every game is winnable. There are no guaranteed victories in this league. It's a testament to the the evolution of the SEC, where it continues to grow stronger from top to bottom. Used to be people would make jokes. Well, you only have a few good teams, and
Mhm.
but not anymore. We have a conference that may be as strong as it has ever been. Parity is the new word in the SEC, and I love it.
That's some great points. And obviously, I've enjoyed the fruits of that parity over the last couple of weeks. So I think you're making fantastic points, and I'm looking forward to more of it. But I think you're right. You go back to, I think it's accentuated even more when you look at the East West, the division we used to have, and you could kind of pick out, oh, well, these are your two or three teams that have a shot this year in the West. These are your two or three teams that have a shot this year in the East. And everybody else was just kind of playing for that muddled middle ground. And I think we're as far from that as possible, especially this year. Great points. Okay.
That takes us into 4 down territory. We start by a look at the previous weekend by giving our brown bag of the week and then our post game quote of the week. Then we'll move to the upcoming weekend and make our picks for the sure thing and upset of the week. So, Darren, who is your brown bag from last weekend?
All right. I'm going to read a quote. Vandy went out and made it happen with NIL. You see the amount of publicity Diego is getting? Once we get an NIL support system like that, we will be able to compete in the SEC. Would you like to take a stab at who made that statement? It is Mark Stoops, the head coach at Kentucky. After losing to Vanderbilt, makes it a point to talk about how well Vanderbilt is doing with NIL by going out and grabbing Diego Pavia. I'd like to point out that I am all in. I am Diego Pavia for president. That's my 2024 slogan. I am all in on Diego Pavia. That being said, Diego Pavia is a 0-star recruit that had one offer coming out of high school and went to the JUCO route. Strictly, in his own words, I had the grades, but I was just trying to get somebody's attention. So he went the JUCO route, ended up at New Mexico State. That was his best FBS offer. No slight, New Mexico State, my apologies. That was his best FBS offer, and now has ended up at Vanderbilt strictly because the coach that pulled him to New Mexico State believed in him enough to pull him to Vanderbilt. It is not because he is a former 5-star recruit that Vanderbilt had to pay a ton of money to get. Who would that possibly describe? Who would that? Oh, that's Kentucky and their current quarterback, Brock Vandagriff. Hardcore brown bag, Mark Stoops. You're whining at this point. I feel better. Thank you.
Wow. That was so well delivered, Darren. So well delivered.
Who's your brown bag this week?
I think you spoke for a lot of us when we heard that press game or that post game press conference. We thought, did he just say what we thought he
Exactly.
said? So
Exactly.
that's a great one. My brown bag goes to Kirby Smart. The incident where he lost his visor and was trying to get to somebody, and the Mississippi State quarterback Van Buren was in his way, and he shoved him out of the way. Now he called Jeff Lebby, the head coach at Mississippi State, to talk about it. He called Van Buren. He reached out. He apologized. He acknowledged that he should not have done that. But here's how serious this is. The SEC commissioner, Greg Sankey, released a statement about it today. It is absolutely unacceptable for coaches to shove players. You can say it's the heat of the game and you're trying to get calls in and time's of the essence. but it was just a bad look for Kirby. I don't think he had any malicious intent,
Mhm.
uh, but at some point, you got to maybe stop and look in the mirror and say, what was it that led me in that moment to push someone? He says he didn't realize who it was, but regardless of who it is, what would lead you to push anybody in that
Mhm.
moment? So I think there's some concern there. It's already being addressed. I don't anticipate we're going to see it again, and that's why I don't want to pile on Kirby Smart. But it's a reminder that we don't lose our heads in the heat of the moment. That we keep our wits about us. We understand our surroundings, and as coaches, you never lay a hand like that on a player. So
Right.
that's my brown bag for the week.
Uh, Very, very well said. I agree completely. Very well said.
That takes us to our post game quote of the week. Darren, what did you find for us?
Sometimes coaches can be boring. Okay. And we had that circumstance this week in all of our post game press conferences. It was the most exciting thing was 3 seconds of Steve Sarkeesian talk about a corn dog. So there's just not a whole lot that you can have. But we could not be luckier because this happens to be right around, it would be, I guess it would be 2 years. We're within a couple of days either way. We're not on the exact day, but we're within a couple of days of a 2 year, let's call it an anniversary of Mike Leach. Have mercy, we miss him both on the field and off the field. But Mike Leach giving us what is effectively the, if not the greatest, a top 10 90 seconds ever in a post game interview on the field. So I thought since we were getting there close to that we're within, a couple of days either way of it being the 2 years. And we obviously didn't have anybody giving us a Mike Leach moment this weekend. We would take this opportunity to celebrate Mike Leach and watch one of his greatest post game moments ever. So let's listen to what Coach Mike Leach has to say after a big win.
Weddings. I'm in the middle of planning one right now. Do you have any advice for me?
Who are you marrying?
His name is Trevor.
Okay, yeah, well, I'll have to just set up a meeting and I'll talk to him. Okay, so where's Trevor from?
He's from Florida.
What does Trevor do for a living?
He works in sports as well, covers football.
He does what?
He covers football as well.
Really? Well, I don't know. We'll keep a close eye on it, but whatever you and Trevor decide, I would kind of keep it on the down low, which you failed to do that. Trevor was probably planning to, but you didn't. So go ahead and don't say anything else about it, but as soon as the season's over, or even an off week, go elope. Trust me on that. Go elope. Because basically every female in the family is going to terrorize you guys until it's over. Once it's over, I mean, they'll be upset for a few days, but it'll be over. And then, you cruise away, along, have a happy marriage, have a happy life.
I'll pass along the message. Thanks, Coach. Congrats on the win.
Trevor, unless he's crazy, is totally on my side. And trust me on this. If Trevor doesn't have the sense to do that, tell him to call me, because, I mean, he needs to do. I've told all my kids, I'll give you $10,000 extra if you elope. So far, they haven't done it, but I would, too.
I'll have him call you for sure.
All right.
Thanks, Coach.
All right.
And still, and we've probably talked about it every time we've watched this. This is our third time we watched it, or we talked about it the week it happened, because we weren't on YouTube yet then. We were strictly audio, but we talked about it and we showed it last year, right around this same time. The thing I love is she felt comfortable asking him the question because she knew he was going to answer it. But even with that expectation, there is not a single thing he said that she was expecting. Every word he said caught her off guard. And when she obviously is still engaged, but is trying to wrap it up because she knows she only has a certain amount of time, he's like, look, unless he's crazy, Trevor agrees with me. Have him call me. And he just wasn't finished. He was going to give her the advice she asked for. What an amazing moment. Mike Leach, his unpredictable offense, you can tell it just came out of his personality, and you can see it on the field and off the field. What a great moment.
He is missed. There was
Yes,
nobody else like him.
absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't know how we segue from that, Darren. I think make a sure thing pick and an upset pick.
Maybe we can be unpredictable in our picks like Coach Leach. Maybe that's our segue.
What would the pirate have us do?
There you go. Wish I had a pirate hat. That'd be a perfect change. But anyway, all right.
Darren, who's your sure thing pick for this week?
All right, my sure thing pick. I'm in a little bit of a quandary this week because if you remember last week, I made my equally as incredible underdog pick, 2-0. Just saying, with Vanderbilt, and I said if Vanderbilt wins, I will pick them until they lose. Well, here's the problem: they're not underdogs this week, which scares me. Vanderbilt, don't you do it. Don't you do it. So I am going to stick to my word and pick Vanderbilt. But this time, since they are the favorite, I'm going to go with Vanderbilt as my sure thing pick. So Vanderbilt over Ball State. That is my pick. How about you? Who's your sure thing pick?
I've got Florida beating Kentucky in the Swamp. It's Lagway's game or team now. Mm-hmm. I'm impressed by what I saw from Florida against Tennessee. Granted, I wish they would have gone for 2, as you pointed out earlier. Florida at home, a game they have to have, new quarterback. I think we're going to see some renewed energy from Florida. I've got the Gators.
All right.
How about your upset pick?
Scared money don't make money. Yeah, DJ Lagway is impressive, but he hadn't faced Kentucky's defense. Nope. Kentucky's pulling off the upset.
Nice.
We'll just keep that rolling, talk about the same game. How about you? Who's your upset pick?
I was surprised when I saw the line in the Alabama-Tennessee game. Alabama is favored by 2.5, which makes Tennessee the underdog at home at Neyland. And I just can't do that. I'm going. My upset pick is going to be the Volunteers. I don't know why they're not favored, but since they're the underdog, I'm going to go with Tennessee.
So you're getting back at me for picking against your sure thing pick by picking Tennessee. I see what you did there. Okay. Well, I thought we were friends, but I mean, whatever.
It is what it is. Thank
That's
you.
Right.
Remember, watching new episodes drop every Tuesday. You can be a part of our pick'em. There's another episode that will come out in a day or two where we make all of our picks for this week, and you can participate in making your picks online with us. There's a link just below there, and click on that, and it'll take you right to that particular site. We're available on all podcast platforms. You can watch us here on YouTube. We appreciate your support. Tell people about the show. Hit that subscribe button. Continue to make your comments. We appreciate them. We read every single one of them.
Absolutely.
Like you, we love college football, particularly the SEC. So until next time, y'all take care.
Have a great week.